everyone! You ever hear the old saying that the pen is mightier than the sword? Well, I recently took that to heart and decided to align myself with the faction of penmanship by turning myself into paper. I'm really psyched about the possibilities this will bring me, as I've always been pretty afraid of swords and getting stabbed to death. Thankfully though, I don't think anyone's gonna try and mess with me now that I've aligned myself with the likes of scribes and the literate. I'm practically invincible. Oh my god, no, don't, leave me alone, don't hurt me, please, I beg you. Oh my god, I don't even like reading, man. You ever decide you were in the mood for a turn-based RPG and then realize that you're a casual that doesn't know the first thing about the genre? Same. Released in 2000 for the Nintendo 64, Paper Mario is an RPG that follows Nintendo's favorite plumber on a quest to rescue several magical star spirits from captivity and use their power to defeat his arch-nemesis Bowser after he's kidnapped and imprisoned Princess Peach. Originally conceived as a sequel to the SNES game Super Mario RPG, which I won't be comparing this game to as I haven't played through it yet by the way, the game was developed by Intelligent Systems and features a blend of turn-based combat, puzzle solving, and light platforming amid a paper aesthetic that's not entirely dissimilar to what you might see from something like Yoshi's Story. Much like its 16-bit predecessor, it was designed around being accessible to non-RPG players, and as such, simplifies many conventions of the genre in order to be more palatable for newcomers or younger gamers. The game received critical acclaim back in the early 2000s, with critics across the board giving it high marks and praising everything from its gameplay to its visuals and storytelling, even if some critics found things a bit too simple or corny for its own good. One critic in particular, a Mr. Chester Barber for Next Generation, even went as far as to say,
Paper Mario is one of the best RPGs ever, and definitely the best RPG available for the Nintendo 64.
To which I say, well, Chester, I agree. Especially because it's one of the only RPGs on the N64. But does it hold up? Because being one of the best RPGs on a console that, again, didn't have many RPGs to begin with is one thing, but calling it one of the best RPGs of all time, at least back in the year 2000, is another. And don't get me wrong, I'm actually pretty excited to get to play through this game again, as I played it a ton as a kid. It was actually one of my first RPGs, and I vividly remember everything from watching its awesome commercial on TV, to printing out my own little Paper Mario cutout to make an action figure out of, and I even distinctly recall it being one of the very first games that I got to the end of. Though, if I'm being honest, I probably just got stuck after the Koopa Bros fight and ended up watching older family friends blaze through the game like their lives depended on it. Anyway, I'm genuinely curious to find out whether or not Paper Mario is as good as I remember it being, or if time has been unkind to this tree-turned role-playing game. But first, a quick question of the day. What's a game that you'd love to see a sequel or remake for? I'd personally love to see a remake of Final Fantasy IX, which is probably my favorite game of all time. There's just something really special about that game for me that I can't really describe, and any effort on my part to do so would probably take way longer than a simple question of the day prompt would allow me to anyway. All I can really say is that despite being a casual enjoyer of JRPGs at best, Final Fantasy IX scratches a huge itch for me and is one of the most important games that I've ever played personally. Be sure to leave your answer to the question of the day over in the comments. I'd love to hear your answer. On top of that, if you're new here and are enjoying what you see so far, feel free to subscribe and stuff so that you can check out all the other videos that I come out with in the future. And with that out of the way, on with the video. Paper Mario's gameplay consists of navigating Nintendo's mascot DeForce through a side-scrolling overworld and fighting enemies via turn-based combat in between moments of narrative progression. Much like any other RPG, most of your playtime will be spent trekking to different areas or dungeons, managing an inventory or picking up items in shops, and racking up experience to level your character to new, unforeseen heights. However, unlike a run-of-the-mill RPG, Paper Mario goes out of its way to streamline the genre and provide an easier, more casual means of adventure for newcomers. For example, it adopts the shonen Deus Ex Machina of friendship to turn Mario into a nearly indestructible force of nature. Along your journey, you're able to pick up a number of party members that can both assist you in battle and help you navigate obstacles through the use of one of their unique special abilities. Ostensibly, your party members are like the ultimate Swiss Army knife at your disposal and are there to give Mario access to a bunch of useful skills that he otherwise wouldn't be able to use. Need to break out of a Koopa prison? There's a partner for that. Stuck in a dark room with a literal platoon of Shy Guys? There's a partner for that too. Oh, and here's a good one. Forget that you've been able to swim since 1985 and don't want to drown. You guessed it, there's also a partner for that. Essentially, no matter the situation, no matter the obstacle in your way, there's always a partner for it. And as if that weren't enough, you don't even have to worry about leveling them up conventionally to keep them viable in combat. Despite the fact that Mario levels up in the traditional RPG art of bonk enemy, get point, and profit, your compatriots can each get upgraded twice via super blocks that are scattered throughout the world. And while it is kinda weird to have the Mushroom Kingdom's equivalent to anabolic steroids just laying around like that, I honestly couldn't be happier about it. As I mentioned earlier, Paper Mario was designed to be a bit of a beginner's RPG so that it could appeal to Mario fans who hadn't really played many games in the genre before. And because of this, Intelligent Systems opted to eject the concept of leveling party members to help cut down on the need to grind levels as a means of keeping things simple. In fact, Paper Mario is probably one of the least grindy RPGs that I've ever played. The game usually throws just enough enemies your way to keep you strong enough for any challenges that lay directly ahead of you, and it also gives you mandatory equipment upgrades that buff your abilities as the journey unfolds. And it doesn't stop there either. One of Paper Mario's most fondly remembered mechanics, its combat, also goes out of its way to appeal to non-RPG players like me in the form of featuring action commands for each move. Basically, in a break from the RPG tradition of hitting a button and waiting for carnage to ensue, Paper Mario gets you right into the thick of the action by making you complete a command and rhythm to the attack for bonus damage.
Looks like you're about to get pwned. Yeah!
It's like I'm really crushing that guy's skull in with a hammer. While I've never had any issues with traditional turn-based combat, there's just something especially engaging about getting to do extra damage to an enemy through these action commands. And again, it's usually just as simple as hitting the A button before an attack connects with you or an enemy, so it's not like it's that hard to get used to doing. In fact, it's so ingrained in my mind that I tend to do this on most other turn-based RPGs to begin with. Now, does it do anything in those games? No. Does it send a sweet hit of dopamine to my peanut-sized brain anyway? Yes sir, it does. The combat's just fun, and it makes a lot of sense as a mechanic designed to make RPGs more appealing to a wider audience without jettisoning turn-based battles entirely. While I guess they could have gone the route they ended up going with in Super Paper Mario by making the combat more action and platforming based with RPG elements, I feel like this is a lot more unique and ultimately works better overall. I also particularly enjoyed the other alterations that the game made to RPG conventions like handling equipment and magic. As opposed to a series like Final Fantasy, which can quickly devolve into me anxiously checking my inventory to make sure I have the best items equipped, Paper Mario hands equipment upgrades to you at very specific moments in the game and works them into the narrative fairly organically. It also has a badge system that allows you to customize Mario with special abilities. This can range from stuff like buffs for your health or flower points, which are this game's version of mana, to special attacks and stuff of that nature. While clever management of badges can be a relatively big part of the game if you want it to be, it's handled pretty well and remains approachable enough for anyone to pick up and get the hang of regardless of whether or not they play many RPGs. And the same could also be said about this game's take on summons, which comes in the form of calling for help from each of the star spirits that you've rescued throughout your adventure. Paper Mario also loves to throw puzzles your way throughout your adventure that can range from something like needing to flip switches to control stairs or navigate a forest in search of the correct path to your destination. The puzzles themselves are relatively harmless and usually exist to offer a little variety to the gameplay, and as such, I don't really have any problems with them, even if I'd have preferred that the game threw less of them my way. When it comes to RPGs, one of my biggest issues with the genre tends to be how long some of these games can run, and while Paper Mario does run for a good 20 or so hours, that's still a lot shorter than your typical RPG from the era. I mean, sure, I would have preferred if this was a good 5 to 8 hours shorter, but I also just prefer shorter games in general and willingly admit that the game is actually really well paced. The game does a good job of taking its time to flesh out its world and story to a level that I found adequate for its audience, extremely funny, and without diving into the minutiae of the story itself, I think it was actually really successful in giving its characters some, well, character. For example, I really love this game's take on Princess Peach. In between each of the game's chapters, you're given a brief intermission where you get to play as her and snoop around your castle for hints on where you should take Mario next. While these segments are usually really short and extremely easy, I personally enjoyed them and thought it was a cool way to make Princess Peach feel less helpless in her situation. It also kinda reminded me of those Mary Jane segments from Insomniac's Spider-Man game, only less intrusive. Overall, things just kinda click for this game, and everything feels really top-notch. While a few moments can be a little frustrating due to some light backtracking, the odd fetch quest, or a slight difficulty spike, I personally found Paper Mario to be a top-tier RPG that I could sit back and enjoy. Plus, some of these quests are just plain funny. Like, why am I bribing a guy with a lemon for pivotal information? Who knows, or even really cares? While I am a little biased due to having been a fan of the game since its initial release, the moves this game makes to be approachable to a wider audience does a great job of streamlining a lot of the things that have plagued RPGs over the years. And coincidentally, that means that a lot of the genre's mechanics that may have been more likely to have aged poorly over the years have also been touched up a bit. While I totally understand that some die-hard RPG fans may find this game's offerings a bit too primitive for their liking, I don't think that necessarily makes these mechanics bad in and of themselves. They were just designed to do a very specific thing and accomplish that task quite well. And visually, Paper Mario is a total home run. While a lot of the games from back around the turn of the century haven't exactly aged all that well, Paper Mario's simple art style looks every bit as sharp now as it did back then. A huge part of this is due to how the game opted to use flat 2D assets for the vast majority of its characters and objects, as opposed to making them polygonal as was quickly becoming the norm at the time. Because honestly, while I have a lot of nostalgia and personally love the aesthetic of early 3D graphics, there's no denying that a lot of them have aged particularly poorly. Really? Again? Plus, Paper Mario actually does feature 3D assets scattered throughout the game that tend to have aged way better than a lot of stuff from some of its contemporaries due to the game's art style. Because everything's, made of paper in the game, jagged and blocky architecture just makes a lot of sense and doesn't stand out anywhere near as much as it would in another game. Plus, due to the game's lovely paper aesthetic, the by now simple graphical effects that the game likes to employ from time to time genuinely still look great. Because the game is framed as a story being read out of a book, there's a generally heightened sense of reality, even for something in the Mario universe, that the paper art style really complements. It seriously makes the borderline vaudevillian antics of Mario and company feel pretty grounded due to how exaggerated the typical children's story you'd find in a book tends to be by default. And in my opinion, the game's art style is as timeless as it gets, and it helps differentiate the game from some of its mainline Mario counterparts by making it stand out. Paper Mario also happens to have an extremely good soundtrack, complete with memorable originals, rearranged classics from across the Mario series up to that point, and it manages to perfectly complement the content on display in the game itself. Despite not being the most epic game ever by design, the game's soundtrack is pretty good at elevating the action to epic standards when it needs to, and it also does a deft job of providing both levity and humor when the game is feeling a little quicker on its feet too. In fact, I'd even go as far as to say that the game's use of music and sound effects reminds me of the way that many early silent films used music to complement their visuals too. However, this could also just be due to the game's love of sight gags and a style of humor that owes a lot to the Chuck Jones era of Looney Tunes cartoons, which in itself owes a bit to the works of silent comedy geniuses like Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin. Alright, seriously, why are you trying to throw a bottle at me this time?
For punctuation.
Oh, I exclaimed, knowing that it had nearly been a minute since I had made a joke. The game's music stands as having some of the most quintessentially Mario tunes to ever make it into the series for me, and I honestly associate songs like the Toad Town or Battle theme with the franchise as much as I do stuff like Super Mario World's Athletic theme or the Overworld theme from the original Super Mario Bros. So, does Paper Mario hold up? Well, yeah. The game remains every bit as effective an introduction to the RPG genre now as it did back in the early 2000s, and I generally think that the game's relatively short length, sense of humor, and gameplay make this an extremely easy game to pick up and recommend. It's also one of the more readily available Mario-themed RPGs out there too, as you can pick it up on the N64, the Wii U, and it's also going to come out on Nintendo Switch Online at some point too. I think the best way to express how beloved this game is would be to remind people that this game and its first two sequels are so treasured within the canon of Super Mario games that people still get excited for new entries in the series, even though many have said that Paper Mario's fallen off a steep cliff in terms of its quality since then. And while I can't corroborate this because I haven't played any other Paper Marios aside from the Wii installment, I do think that kinda sums up how fun an RPG this first game is. If you haven't played Paper Mario before, I can't recommend it enough. Whether you're a diehard RPG fan or just a non-RPG fella looking for something a little out of your comfort zone, there's a good chance that you'll really enjoy this game. Anyway, with that said and done, that brings us to the end of this video. Feel free to like, comment, or subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and feel free to leave an answer to the question of the day if you haven't already. On top of that, you're more than welcome to support my channel by donating to the Buy Me a Coffee link in the description or in the pinned comment. You could also hit me up on Twitter and Instagram with game recommendations for a future video by looking up @NichePlays on both those respective apps or by following the links over in the description. So yeah, bye.